Imagine you're camping in one of the coldest places on Earth. It's nearly minus 30 degrees Celsius, nearly minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside your tent, the wind screams like something alive. You zip your sleeping bag tighter, close your eyes. Then suddenly, everyone inside the tent wakes up. Not because of an avalanche. Not because of an animal. Not because someone heard footsteps. But because every single person agrees they need to escape immediately. Not tomorrow. Not in 5 minutes. Now. They don't even unzip the tent. They slash it open from the inside. They leave behind their boots, their coats, their food, their axes, their cameras, everything needed to survive. Then they run, barefoot, into one of the deadliest blizzards imaginable. None of them would ever return.
Absolutely not. You know what? If I wake up and my friends start cutting the tent open, I'm putting my boots on first. You can panic. I'm surviving.
That's what makes this story so terrifying. These weren't amateurs. These were some of the Soviet Union's most experienced winter hikers. If they abandoned everything, they believed something outside, or perhaps inside, was more dangerous than freezing to death. In this episode, we're exploring one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries, the Dyatlov Pass incident. Welcome back to Project Wake. I'm Connor.
And I'm Rex. Today, we're climbing a mountain with the worst Yelp reviews in history. 0 stars. Everybody died. Would not recommend.
Dude, really?
Sorry.
Today we'll separate verified evidence from decades of rumors, government secrecy, and conspiracy theories. Some details have been confirmed through official investigations and recovered evidence. Others remain theories, with varying levels of support. We'll clearly distinguish between documented facts and speculation throughout this episode. The Soviet Union, winter 1959. The year is 1959. The Cold War is intensifying. The Soviet Union is competing with the United States in science, military power, and the space race. Military testing across remote regions is common, and many activities remain classified for decades. Far from the major cities lies the vast northern Ural Mountains. Thousands of square miles of wilderness, where winter temperatures can plunge below minus 30 degrees Celsius, minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. One mountain in particular carried an ominous local name, Kolit-Syakhl. Translated from the Mansi language, is often rendered as Dead Mountain.
See, that's where the documentary ends, for me. Nobody names a mountain Dead Mountain because the scenery is nice.
The name is generally understood to refer to the mountain's lack of game animals rather than supernatural events, but it certainly added to the mystery later. Meet the expedition. The expedition was organized through the Ural Polytechnical Institute. 10 experienced skiers volunteered. Each had extensive winter survival training. Their destination: Mount O'Torton. A difficult Category 3 expedition, the highest difficulty rating used at the time. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student known for his leadership, technical skills, and love of radio equipment and photography. The team. The group included Igor Dyatlov, expedition leader, Yuri Doroshenko, Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Zinaida Kalmogorova, Georgy Krivonischenko, Rustam Slobodin, Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov, Yuri Yudin. Each person brought different skills, but all were experienced in winter travel.
That's not a random group of tourists. These people basically had professional snow survivor on their resume.
Exactly. That's why what happened next has puzzled investigators for more than 60 years. The one man who lived. On January 28, 1959, something unexpected happened. One member, Yuri Yudin, became too ill to continue. Suffering from severe joint pain and chronic health issues, he made the painful decision to turn back alone. The remaining 9 continued into the mountains. It would save his life.
Imagine living with that. You go home because your knees hurt, and later discover every one of your friends is gone.
Yudin spent decades wondering what had happened. He became one of the most important first-hand sources because he knew the group so well before the tragedy. The last photographs. One reason investigators know so much about the expedition is because the hikers kept journals and cameras. The recovered film shows smiling faces, snow-covered forests, friends joking together, skiing, setting up camp. Completely unaware, they were documenting the final days of their lives.
That might be the creepiest part. Looking at pictures of people who have no idea what's coming.
Those photographs would later become some of the most examined images in modern mystery history. The last camp. On February 1st, 1959, weather conditions worsened. Snow intensified. Visibility dropped. Rather than descending into the shelter of nearby trees, the group established camp on the exposed eastern slope of Kolet Syakhl. Researchers still debate whether this was intentional or the result of poor visibility, causing them to miss their intended route. They dug into the snow, pitched their large canvas tent, prepared for the night, wrote in their journals, and took one final known photograph. No one knows what happened after darkness fell.
Somewhere between dinner and sunrise, history turned into a mystery.
9 experienced hikers, 1 isolated mountain, and 1 night that still defies a universally accepted explanation. The Frozen Trail. Their last journal entries described a difficult climb through worsening weather, but nothing suggested panic or danger. They pitched their tent for the night, ate dinner, and settled into sleep. By morning, they had vanished.
And somehow the only guy who lived was the one who said, "Nah, my back hurts." Sometimes listening to your body really does save your life.
It would take weeks before anyone realized something had gone terribly wrong. January 31st, Dyatlov group leaves some of their gear in a forest on a platform set high above ground, known as La Base or Camp Base. February 1st, the group leaves on the last day of their trip. They start out fairly late and walk for only 2.5 miles. They set a tent around 5 p.m. on a slope of Kolitsyakal, just 10 miles from the Mount Otorten. They eat their last dinner between 6 to 7 p.m. Subsequent investigation showed that 1 or 2 of the members left the tent to relieve themselves, since Semyon Zolotaryov and Nikolai Thibault-Brignol were better dressed. It was suggested that it was the 2 men who left the tent before something happened. They never came home. Igor Dyatlov had promised that once the expedition reached civilization, he would send a telegram to the Ural Polytechnical Institute. Everyone expected delays. Winter expeditions often ran behind schedule. When February 12th passed without a message, no one immediately panicked. But as the days stretched on, friends and family grew increasingly worried. Parents began calling the university. Students asked questions. Something wasn't right. Finally, under pressure from relatives, Soviet officials approved a search operation. At first, it was made up of fellow students and experienced hikers. Soon afterward, police, military personnel, and rescue teams joined the search. Helicopters began scanning the endless, white wilderness. No one expected what they were about to find.
Imagine being one of the rescue pilots. Nothing but snow. Trees. Mountains. Miles and miles of absolutely nothing. Then, you spot a tent.
The tent. On February 26, 1959, searchers located the hikers' campsite. The tent was still standing, partially collapsed under snow. Inside, everything was still there. Sleeping bags, food, boots, warm coats, personal journals, cameras, even money. Nothing appeared stolen. There were no signs that anyone had packed to leave. Then investigators noticed something chilling. The tent had been cut open from the inside. Instead of using the entrance, someone had sliced multiple openings through the canvas. Whatever caused them to leave, it happened so suddenly that they chose knives over zippers.
That's the part one can't wrap my head around. You don't destroy your own shelter when it's below freezing. Unless you think staying inside is somehow even worse.
Investigators later documented several cuts in the tent fabric that were consistent with exits made from within. That observation became one of the central mysteries of the case. Footprints in the snow. Outside the tent, searchers found footprints. Not running. Not scattered. Not the signs of people fleeing in blind terror. Instead, many of the prints suggested the group walked downhill together toward a nearby forest. Some footprints appeared to have been made by people wearing socks. Others by bare feet. Very few showed evidence of boots. Think about that. Temperatures that night were estimated to be around minus 25 degrees Celsius to minus 30 degrees Celsius. A person can begin suffering frostbite in minutes. Yet these experienced hikers walked into the darkness without proper winter clothing.
Forget monsters. Forget aliens. Forget Bigfoot. Walking barefoot into Siberia at night is terrifying enough.
The cedar tree. Roughly 1.5 kilometers from the tent, beneath a towering cedar tree, searchers discovered the first two bodies. 21-year-old Yuri Doroshenko, 23-year-old Georgy Krivonischenko. Both were found wearing little more than underwear. One still wore only a single sock. Nearby, the remains of a small fire. Broken branches high in the cedar suggested someone had climbed the tree. Some investigators believed they were trying to look back toward the campsite. Others believed they were desperately trying to escape something on the ground. The bark of the tree was damaged. There were traces of skin. It appeared someone had climbed it in desperation.
Imagine climbing a frozen tree. Barefoot. With numb hands. Whatever scared them. They still wanted to see where it was.
The trail back. As rescuers searched between the cedar tree and the abandoned tent, they found 3 more bodies. Expedition leader Igor Dyatlov. Igor Dyatlov was found 300 meters from the cedar, face up, head towards the tent. Above the snow were visible only his hands, clenched into fists folded in front of his chest. Then Zinaida Kalmogorova. Zinaida was found 630 meters from the cedar. Face down, head towards the tent. She was better dressed than the bodies, under the cedar. She had on 3 pairs of socks. 2 pairs were thin, then the 3rd pair was woolen with insoles inside. She had no footwear. Finally, Rustam Slobodin. Each was positioned, as though attempting to return to camp. Almost as if, after reaching the woods, they realized they had to get back to the tent, or they wouldn't survive. They never made it.
It's heartbreaking. They were so close. But not close enough.
Where were the others? 5 hikers had now been found. 4 were still missing. Snow continued falling. Search teams dug through deep drifts for weeks. Days turned into months. Then, spring arrived. As the snow melted, a hidden ravine finally revealed its secret. The ravine. Nearly 75 meters beyond the cedar tree, inside a snow-filled ravine. Rescuers discovered the remaining 4 hikers. Ludmila Dubinina. First found was the body of Dubinina, on her knees, with her face and chest pressed to the rock. She was also missing her eyes and tongue. Radioactive traces was found on her brown sweater. Alexander Kolevatov. The body of Alexander Kolevatov was well insulated, but he was missing a hat and shoes. He had a broken nose, open wound behind the ear, and deformed neck. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol was well protected against the coldness of Siberian winter. It was suggested that he and Zolotaryov might have been outside of the tent at the time mysterious threat struck them. He had multiple fractures to the temporal bone. Semyon Zolotaryov. The body of Zolotaryov had a camera around his neck and eyes missing. These hikers wore more clothing. Unlike the others, some garments had clearly belonged to their dead companions. Investigators concluded that survivors may have removed clothing from those who had already succumbed to the cold in an effort to stay alive. It was a grim but logical act in a desperate struggle for survival. Then, the medical examinations began, and that's when the mystery became even darker.
Wait, this is where we start hearing about the impossible injuries.
Exactly. Broken ribs, massive internal trauma, radiation, missing eyes, a missing tongue, and wounds that some experts compared to the force of a car crash without obvious external injuries. Those findings would fuel decades of speculation. So far, the evidence raises more questions than answers. Why leave the tent without winter gear? Why walk calmly into the freezing darkness? Why were some trying to return while others built a fire? And what happened to the final 4 in the ravine? The evidence they couldn't explain. When investigators finally recovered all 9 hikers, many believed the mystery was nearly solved. Surely the autopsies would reveal what happened. Perhaps an avalanche. Perhaps hypothermia. Perhaps a simple accident. Instead, the medical reports created more questions than answers. Some injuries made perfect sense. Others still puzzle forensic experts more than 65 years later. Official cause of death. The first 5 hikers recovered, the 2 beneath the cedar tree and the 3 found between the forest and the tent, showed a consistent pattern. According to the official autopsies, their primary cause of death was hypothermia. In simple terms, they froze to death. Some also had cuts, bruises, and abrasions that investigators considered relatively minor and consistent with exposure, falls, or movement through rough terrain. At first glance, that seemed straightforward. But the final 4 hikers were different. Very different.
So basically, the first group looked like they died from the cold. The second group looked like something else happened first.
Exactly. And that's where the mystery truly begins. The impossible injuries. When doctors examined the bodies recovered from the ravine, they found injuries unlike anything expected from an ordinary camping accident. 23-year-old Lyudmila Dubinina suffered multiple fractured ribs. 53-year-old Semyon Zolotaryov also had extensive chest fractures. 24-year-old Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignol suffered a severe skull fracture. Medical examiner Dr. Boris Vozrozdeny reportedly concluded that the force required to cause such injuries was comparable to that seen in high-speed vehicle collisions. Yet there were few corresponding external wounds. The implication was that an immense blunt force had acted on the body without producing the kind of surface trauma often expected from such impacts.
Wait, you're telling me their ribs were crushed? But they weren't covered in massive cuts?
That's what made the findings so unusual. The injuries were real. The question has always been, what produced them? The missing eyes and tongue. One of the most discussed aspects of the case involves Lyudmila Dubinina. When her body was recovered months later from the snow-filled ravine, investigators documented that her tongue was missing, along with soft tissues of the mouth. Some of the recovered bodies also lacked eyes, and in certain cases, portions of facial soft tissue were absent. These details have fueled countless documentaries, books, and conspiracy theories. However, there is an important fact that is often left out. The 4 hikers in the ravine had been buried beneath snow for weeks before being discovered. Modern forensic experts point out that decomposition, scavenging by small animals, flowing meltwater, and environmental exposure can remove delicate soft tissues, especially the eyes, lips, and tongue, without indicating a deliberate attack. In other words, the injuries were documented, but the cause of those specific missing tissues remains consistent with natural postmortem processes, according to many forensic analyses.
So, Hollywood says something ripped out their eyes. Science says nature can be surprisingly brutal.
Exactly. Separating documented evidence from dramatic interpretation is one of the biggest challenges in this case. Radiation. Then investigators made another discovery. Several articles of clothing collected as evidence showed elevated levels of radioactive contamination. This single fact has generated decades of speculation. Was there a nuclear accident? A secret military weapon? A classified experiment? Or something even stranger? The official records acknowledged radioactive contamination on some clothing, but they did not conclude that radiation caused the hikers' deaths. Researchers have proposed several possible explanations. One possibility is occupational contamination. At least one hiker had previously worked in an environment where radioactive materials were present. Another is environmental contamination from regional industrial or nuclear activities. To this day, no universally accepted explanation counts for every detail.
So yes, radiation was found. But no, that doesn't automatically mean they got blasted by a secret Soviet death ray.
Correct. The evidence confirms contamination. It does not, by itself, prove why it was there. Strange clothing. Investigators also noted that some clothing appeared unusually worn or discolored after months in harsh conditions. Over the years, stories spread claiming the victims' skin had turned bright orange or that their hair had suddenly turned white. These claims have become part of Dyatlov Pass folklore. While some photographs and witness descriptions mention changes in skin coloration, forensic experts note that decomposition, cold exposure, embalming, photography, and lighting can all alter appearance. Similarly, hair can appear lighter after death due to frost, drying, or changes in surrounding tissue. There is no confirmed evidence that the hiker's hair literally turned white overnight.
So another case of the internet making things 10 times creepier than they already are.
Sometimes. But not every strange report can be dismissed so easily. The military investigation. As public interest grew, Soviet authorities continued their investigation. Eventually, the official case concluded with a now famous statement. The hikers died due to a compelling natural force. No specific explanation. No clear cause. Just those words. Soon after, the investigation was closed. The area around the incident was reportedly restricted for several years adding to public suspicion that authorities knew more than they revealed.
Imagine telling the families, "So, something happened." What? We're not exactly saying.
The vague wording became one of the reasons conspiracy theories flourished for decades. KGB connection. One of the oldest conspiracy theories suggests the hikers accidentally witnessed a secret Soviet military or intelligence operation. Some versions claim they encountered KGB agents. Others propose that one or more members of the expedition had connections to Soviet intelligence, and that the trip itself served another purpose. Supporters point to the Cold War setting, military secrecy, and classified archives. However, no verified evidence has demonstrated that the hikers were conducting espionage or that the KGB killed them. Many historians regard these claims as speculative.
Basically, Cold War plus secrecy equals everyone starts blaming spies.
Exactly. The lack of transparency left room for imagination. Witnesses in the sky. One detail continues to intrigue researchers. During the weeks surrounding the tragedy, multiple witnesses, including hikers in other expeditions, and some local observers, reported seeing glowing orange spheres or lights moving across the northern sky. Some reports were documented at the time. The sightings have been linked by different authors to military rocket tests, atmospheric phenomena, flare gunshot, or unidentified aerial objects. To date, no direct evidence connects those lights to the deaths on Kolat-Syakhl. But the timing has kept the reports at the center of the mystery.
So, strange lights were reported. That part is real. Whether they had anything to do with the hikers, that's the mystery.
Exactly. Evidence and explanation are not always the same thing. By now, the facts are undeniable. 9 experienced hikers fled their tent. Several died from hypothermia. Others suffered devastating internal injuries. Radioactive contamination was detected on some clothing. Unusual skylights were reported in the region, and the official investigation ended with an explanation that many considered frustratingly vague. What really happened on Dyatlov Pass? Theories, conspiracies, and the truth. Theory number 1, the avalanche. For decades, the avalanche theory was one of the leading explanations. The idea is simple. The hikers pitched their tent on a snow-covered slope. Later that night, a slab of compacted snow may have shifted downhill, partially collapsing the tent. Fearing a larger avalanche, they cut their way out and quickly moved downslope into the forest. Once there, they became separated, attempted to survive, and eventually succumbed to the cold. This theory explains why they left in a hurry, why the tent was cut open from the inside, why they moved together toward the forest, why hypothermia claimed several lives. However, it doesn't answer every question. The slope where the tent stood was relatively gentle. Searchers reported the tent was still partially standing, and there was no massive debris field typical of a large avalanche.
Basically, good theory, but it leaves some holes.
The 2021 scientific study. 2 scientists think they've solved the mystery of the Outlook Pass, and they use the movie Frozen to prove their theory.
Wait, let it go. Let it go. That Frozen movie?
Yup, that's the one.
Okay. This I got to hear.
Although the avalanche theory has been mostly dismissed, a new theory has been proposed that the hikers were hit by a very specific and rare kind of avalanche. Johann Gohm, a scientist who studies snow phenomena, was watching the movie Frozen and saw that Disney had created very realistic snow movement, so he worked with studio animators to develop a model that shows how the group could have been hit by what's called a delayed slab avalanche. This kind of avalanche occurs when you affect the warm, wet snow at the bottom of a slope. This causes the entire face of snow to eventually move at once. In 2021, researchers published a computer modeling study suggesting that a small slab avalanche could still have occurred under the right conditions. Strong winds may have gradually deposited snow above the campsite. Hours later, that snow could have broken loose, compressing the tent and forcing the hikers to escape immediately. The researchers argued this could also account for some of the severe chest injuries if victims were later compressed beneath dense snow. Many scientists consider this one of the strongest natural explanations proposed so far. Still, not everyone agrees it accounts for every detail.
Science basically said it might not have been a Hollywood avalanche, but even a smaller one can be deadly.
Katabatic winds and infrasound. Another natural explanation focuses on the weather itself. Some researchers believe powerful katabatic winds, cold, dense air rushing downhill, created violent gusts capable of making the campsite dangerous. Others proposed infrasound. Infrasound consists of extremely low-frequency sound waves that humans cannot consciously hear. Some experiments suggest prolonged exposure may contribute to anxiety, disorientation, or an overwhelming sense of dread. Supporters argue these effects might explain why the hikers suddenly fled their tent. Critics point out there is little direct evidence that infrasound alone would cause 9 experienced mountaineers to abandon all survival equipment.
So, the mountain itself could have been screaming, just at a frequency nobody could hear.
Donnie Eicher, who spent 5 years researching the incident and actually visited the site, believes that a wind phenomenon called a Kármán vortex street could have produced a terrifying, powerful sound which has proven to induce irrational fear in humans. It's an intriguing hypothesis, but one that remains difficult to test. Secret military testing. Now we enter one of the most enduring conspiracies. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union frequently tested rockets, parachute mines, and other military technologies in remote regions. Supporters of this theory point to several details. Reports of glowing orange lights in the sky, restricted military records, radioactive contamination on some clothing, and the government's secrecy after the incident. One proposal suggests the hikers accidentally entered a military testing zone. Another claims they witnessed classified weapons experiments and were silenced. There is evidence that military testing occurred in parts of the Soviet Union during this era. However, no verified document has linked a specific weapons test to the deaths at Dyatlov Pass.
Whenever governments say, "Nothing to see here," people immediately assume, "Oh, there's definitely something to see."
KGB and secret operations. Some authors believe members of the expedition were unknowingly caught in an intelligence operation involving the KGB. Alexei Radikin wrote a book called The Outlook Pass, where he claimed that 3 of the hikers, one of them Alexander Kolevatov, some believed were KGB agents on a mission to uncover a secret cell of CIA operatives. During the Cold War, a favorite Soviet tactic was to plant radioactive material in places it didn't belong, just to set the Americans on fruitless searches. Now Radikin says that 2 or 3 of the hikers were hired by the KGB to deliver radioactive tainted clothing to CIA agents, and the oldest member of the group, at age 37, Semyon Zolotaryov, joined the group at the last minute. He was a combat veteran with years of military service who eventually went to work for the NKVD, or the Soviet Secret Police, and before transferring to the physics department at UPI, he worked in Moscow at a top-secret scientific facility known as PO Box 3394, and Yuri Krivannashenko worked at PO Box 40410, where a massive nuclear accident occurred in 1957. Alexei Radikin is convinced that this group was not gathered by accident. The histories of at least 3 of the hikers show a lot of KGB connection. The true objective of their mission, unknown to the other members, was to deliver radioactive samples to a group of agents of the CIA and take pictures of the spies. At the beginning of the journey, all the hikers had cameras and journals. We saw them, but when Kolevatov's body was discovered, his journal and camera were missing, and he was one of the suspected spies. Versions of the theory claim the hikers were transporting classified materials. Foreign spies were expected in the area. Soviet agents eliminated witnesses. The investigation was deliberately altered. While these ideas make for compelling stories, historians have found no conclusive evidence supporting them. Most surviving documents point toward a tragic expedition, not a covert operation. UFO theory. The UFO theory remains one of the most popular among paranormal enthusiasts. It centers on eyewitness reports of mysterious glowing, orange lights seen over the northern Urals around the time of the incident. Some argue the hikers encountered an unidentified craft. Others believe they witnessed experimental aircraft mistaken for UFOs. Supporters often cite the reported lights, radiation on some clothing, the lack of a universally accepted explanation. However, no physical evidence recovered from the site confirms the presence of an extraterrestrial craft. The theory remains speculative.
Aliens always get blamed. If I lose my car keys, somebody, somewhere, is blaming aliens.
Wait, you have a car?
Yeah, I only use it when I don't feel like flying. You ever tried flying everywhere? It's exhausting.
No, I don't have wings, but okay, I guess. Bigfoot. Perhaps the most famous and controversial theory involves a creature often called the Yeti or Bigfoot. Some point to one recovered photograph showing a dark figure in the distance. Supporters argue the hikers encountered a large unknown animal. The alleged attack caused panic, forcing them from the tent. The severe injuries are then attributed to a powerful creature. The problem? The image is grainy and lacks sufficient detail. Most researchers believe it simply shows one of the hikers walking through the snow. No footprints matching a large, unknown animal were documented by investigators. There is no physical evidence supporting a Bigfoot encounter.
Poor Bigfoot. He's become the suspect in every mystery involving trees.
Could human error explain everything? Some investigators believe no extraordinary explanation is needed. Imagine this sequence: a perceived avalanche threat, a rapid evacuation, disorientation in darkness, freezing temperatures, attempts to build a fire. Some hikers try returning. Others construct a snow shelter. Injuries occur from falls into the ravine or collapse of snow. Hypothermia finishes what nature began. This explanation doesn't solve every mystery, but it does fit much of the physical evidence. Sometimes, a series of tragic decisions can appear almost supernatural in hindsight.
Sometimes reality doesn't need monsters. Nature is scary enough.
Modern investigation. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case to examine several natural explanations. After reviewing evidence and conducting field studies, officials concluded that a type of slab avalanche, combined with severe weather and poor visibility, was the most likely cause. Many scientists welcomed the renewed investigation. Others argued that important questions remain unanswered, particularly regarding the unusual injuries and the sequence of events after the hikers left the tent. The case remains one of history's most debated cold weather mysteries. Books, movies, and legacy. The Dyatlov Pass incident has inspired countless books, documentaries, podcasts, and feature films. Some notable examples include Dead Mountain by Donnie Icar, which explores the mystery through historical research and first-hand travel to the site. Dyatlov Pass, based on the real story, a Russian television series dramatizing the investigation. Devil's Pass, also released as the Dyatlov Pass incident, a found-footage horror film that imagines a fictional explanation involving secret experiments. The story continues to fascinate because it exists at the intersection of history, survival, science, and mystery.
Great movie. It's one of those stories where everyone walks away with a different answer.
Fact versus conspiracy. Let's separate what we know from what we don't. Confirmed facts. 9 hikers died in February 1959. Yuri Yudin turned back early and survived. The tent was cut open from the inside. Many hikers left without adequate winter clothing. 2 bodies were found beneath a cedar tree. 3 more were found between the cedar and the tent, 4 were recovered months later from a nearby ravine. Several of those 4 had severe internal injuries. Radioactive contamination was detected on 2 of the hikers' regular civilian clothing, not their work clothes, and not on their bodies. Reports of glowing lights in the sky were made by other observers around that time. The original Soviet investigation concluded the deaths were caused by a compelling natural force. The trauma was blunt force impact, not compression, which falling snow would not create those injuries. Russia's modern review favored a slab avalanche, combined with severe weather. Unresolved questions. Why did everyone leave the tent so suddenly? What caused the severe internal injuries? Why were some hikers trying to return? What role, if any, did the reported lights in the sky play? Why did the original investigation use such vague language? Claims without conclusive evidence. Bigfoot attacked the hikers. Aliens abducted or killed the hikers. The KGB executed the group. A secret Soviet weapon directly caused their deaths. Paranormal forces were responsible. These ideas remain part of the mystery's folklore, but are not supported by conclusive physical evidence. Final thoughts. The Dyatlov Pass incident reminds us that some mysteries endure, not because there are no answers, but because no single answer explains every detail. Whether the hikers were overwhelmed by nature, caught in a rare chain of events, or victims of circumstances, we still don't fully understand. Their story continues to captivate the world. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't what happened on Dead Mountain. It's why we're still searching for the answer more than 65 years later.
1. Things for sure. If you ever invite me on a winter camping trip, I'm checking the mountain's nickname first. If it's called Dead Mountain, I'm staying home with hot chocolate.
Well, friends, that's all for now. If you enjoyed this episode or learned anything new, then why not click the like button, share with a friend, tell us your thoughts in the comments, click the notification bell so you won't miss any of our future episodes, and subscribe to help us reach more amazing and awesome people like yourself. We greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for watching. Take care, be safe, be kind, and we will see you next time on Project Wake. Wait before you go. Click on one of the videos here to watch more of Project Wake. Thanks again for watching.